get a lot of value out of copyright and the DMCA.
Right.
Basically, people are constantly putting up stuff that I have advertisements against on YouTube, and becoming more popular than the media that I've put in place where I am. So it feels like at different scales this conversation takes on a very different tone. It's one thing when Disney is talking about it and you say that there's a fundamental right of democracy to alter and comment on things. In my world, hell no. I do not feel like that is a fundamental right of people in my audience to take my work and make it better, which they do and can, and get a larger market share of eyeballs that I rely on for my subsistence.
So I take the opposite view, because everything on Boing Boing is Creative Commons license for non-commercial use, where if you want to take it and remix it or turn it into a book and give it away to your friends, as long as you're not selling ads against it, you're absolutely welcome to do so, because I would argue that...
Yeah, but you guys aren't trying, the bulk of your content is commentary on something else to begin with. I'm like, a lot of the stuff that I'm creating is the first order, it's the first generation of this kind of content.
And we do a mix of both, but that said, obscurity, I think, is the biggest enemy of a creator more than a pirate.
So, I don't bring one thing. So, I think
this is the fundamental dispute that I feel like in this conversation, because I want so much to be a defender of Creative Commons, and yet I feel like at one scale it makes complete sense to me. When you talk about the Disneys of the world and the predatory way that Michael Eisner will talk about this stuff, right? And then what I feel like is that Creative Commons has taken an approach which is to try to create an underground message of this democratized media having inherent value, but at the wrong scale. At a scale which actually hampers people starting to have the conversation, which is, how do I assess the value of my creative goods? And this is a big problem for someone like me and the audience that I have, which are creating for the first time, and the first message they get is, you shouldn't make money off of this. You shouldn't try to bottleneck this stuff in any way. You shouldn't get pissed off if your stuff gets taken and put on YouTube. Because the first thing that you need is popularity, and some sort of a leprechaun is going to save you at some point.
And let me just add too, from a global perspective, you have obviously different laws in different countries. Different creators are working with different sets of rules, and I think it's more. I think it is more complex than just sort of big guy, little guy, and U.S. rules.
Can I just clarify one thing? So I think, look, I understand your particular position precisely. Because on the one hand, you want to have your material out there, right? On the other hand, you want to make sure that you protect it in the sense that if someone's making money, you don't want someone else making money off your work, right? So what you basically said was the worst thing that could happen essentially is I take your work, I put it in another context, I wrap ads on it, and I make a lot of money. That's what YouTube did, by the way. That's exactly what Google does today. They make money by wrapping other people's content in advertising. I think it's one of the biggest problems with Google, and it's one of the biggest problems with YouTube. But on the other hand, I think that you step afoul of other people's creativity if you don't allow them to take your work and rework it in some way. Because it seems like if you put something into the public context, that's just part of the problem of being in public context. You necessarily open yourself up to that potential criticism and remixing. But I think that the remixing is just, in our culture today, remixing is a way that we more commonly critique, well not more commonly, but one of the ways in which we critique, content.
But it is a negative pressure against releasing certain things in large contexts, right? I mean, at least in conversations on a social level, there are some social norms that prohibit us from ripping each other off. Right. I mean, if I started telling the joke that you just told the other day to all of our shared friends, they'd be like, "Oh, you're lame," But in this world, the guy that you had earlier in the video clip, right after mine, is a guy named Phil DeFranco, who basically replicated every single part of the show and added beer and booze to the formula, and kind of pushed forward. I don't have any sense of satisfaction from that. I don't feel like creativity was served in a particular way. I think he was served quite well. But there's a bunch of examples which don't seem to fit this mold.
On the other hand, there's also examples like Corey, my blog mate, Corey Doctorow, who gives away all of his books for absolute free online, but yet his books still made the New York Times bestseller list. So somehow it works.